We have not used our unmanned maritime capability in combat yet, despite having a whole year of combat operations in the Red Sea recently.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year, but so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley. Hey everyone, so this is a special first for Crossing the Valley because today we're helping to introduce a new company to the world. My guests are Rylan Hamilton and Austin Gray. Rylan is a retired surface warfare officer and exited repeat founder. He's led operations for TaskRabbit, built sophisticated factory automation systems for Kiva and then Amazon, and built and sold a logistics company to Shopify. Austin is a naval intelligence officer turned HBS MIT dual degree who's done brief stints at McKinsey and a Ukrainian drone factory. Together, Ryland and Austin are 2/3 of the founding team of Blue Water Autonomy, a marine autonomy startup based out of Boston that aims to supplement America's fleet of large ocean-faring vessels with a new unmanned fleet, to do so at scale. The two sat down with me to discuss coming out of stealth and to lay out their plans to cross the valley in the days, months, and years ahead. Enjoy. Welcome back to Crossing the Valley. I am psyched for today's episode. We've got Austin and Rylan, the co-founders of Blue Water Autonomy, and we're doing something new for the show. This is a launch episode. We're catching up with Austin and Rylan just as they are getting ready, and so by the time you're watching this, they will have launched publicly the company. Super stoked. Guys, thanks so much for making the time and for joining us.
Thanks, Noah.
Thanks.
Let's start with the obvious question. What is Blue Water Autonomy and what is it that y'all are setting out to do?
So Blue Water Autonomy, we're designing and building autonomous ships. We're dual use, but defense first, and our first customer is the Navy.
Straight and to the point. We love that. You guys have been working in stealth for quite some time now. So tell us a little bit about why is now the moment that we get to learn more about the story publicly?
So I met Austin over a year ago, and at that point, I'd finished the sale of my last company. And I was exploring different opportunities. And I'd been in the Navy for 4 years, so I was super interested in sort of maritime autonomy. I won't say the idea came overnight. Austin had some ideas about sort of some use cases for autonomous ships for the Navy. And I got super interested, and we just started meeting every week. And then we started meeting every day. And this slowly evolved to a place where we both had conviction to kind of pass up other opportunities to go start this company. But the thing I think that we did well is we just did a ton of research. We talked to everyone who had thought anything about autonomy in the Navy and trying to figure out where's the white space. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I got is think about the mission first and then work your way backward. Don't think about a piece of technology and try to wedge it into the military.
I think there's a couple of pieces of that story that are really interesting. The first is that what I heard is you guys formed a partnership first, and even before kind of the mission or before the problem, and certainly before the solution, kind of decided you liked working together and working with each other. You know, Austin, I know you had also been in the military and were coming out of grad school, and so was founding a company the thing that you were trying to solve, or how did you go about that period of career exploration?
It was the last thing I was trying to solve. It's a great question. I think kind of what happened is my brain at first got really locked in this sort of problem centric, hey, I really want to solve this one mission problem. And I think having been in the military recently, helps you think about that stuff a lot. Going to Ukraine helps you think about that a lot more when you're really close to the problem set. And then I think once Rylan and I started working together, we sort of fused our information space such that we were sharing a lot of the same, interviews and customer discovery calls. And that really brought us to the place of oh, wow, wait, when you combine this mission and this other mission and this other mission and some tech underlying, you can start solving a lot of stuff at once. And then there's your market case with your investors and the build team.
Yeah. And Rylan, obviously, so you've been through the sale of a company. You've done this dance before. You hear things like entrepreneurship is the pinnacle of insanity, but you're at it again. You're going for another round. What was it that convinced you that this was the thing to sink, 5, 10, the rest of your life into?
I definitely think about spending the next 10 plus years on this. And so when I was exploring different opportunities, I didn't want to just pick something really quick. I wanted to explore a lot of different opportunities, which is why I spent a lot of time with Austin for building up the conviction to do this. But for me, this is the perfect fusion of my background of having spent 4 years as a surface warfare officer in the Navy and loving that experience, and spending the last 15 years in warehouse automation robotics. And so the way I describe this to people is we're building the largest mobile robot ever been built, and that's an autonomous ship that can go across the open oceans.
Tell us the story. How did you guys actually meet? Love to hear that story.
So a guy who I served in Navy intelligence with is family friends with Rylan and entered us via text pretty much the moment he realized we were both thinking about maritime autonomy. And I think that was like 1 p.m. on a Thursday in October. And I think we were having a beer at like 5 p.m. like that same day on a crappy little tourist bar off the Boston Commons.
So it's like a date you don't want to end, just match made in heaven. You guys
exactly. And then we were doing Zoom call the next week, and then another one, comparing some notes. And then I think we did a call with a retired 3-star who was like, you guys are onto something. And we're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
So as you guys like surveyed the landscape and looked at these problems, I'm curious, did you think there were others, a year ago, were there others solving this problem, or did it feel like was it something where, hey, something needs to be done differently or better, or there's just nobody focused on this problem right now? Tell us a little bit about that, kind of like how you got to the conclusion.
Yeah, so I think over a year ago, we didn't see any other sort of venture-backed startup type company focused on this problem. But again, we're not building like a small sort of, unmanned surface vessel that costs like $100,000, but we're building something that costs like many, many millions of dollars. And so I think there's a little bit of intimidation to start a company and convince investors that you can go build something that, relatively is, expensive in the startup world. But when we started looking at it, we're like, but the Navy really needs this, because today they solve that problem with like $2 billion destroyers. And we thought about this concept as, a way to complement today's manned fleet. And it needs to be built. And today, the Navy has built autonomous ships. They're out there. But the state of the art in today is it still needs a chase boat. And so we want to kind of break apart like the autonomous ship from the chase boat to something that can go across open oceans and be reliable enough, because the last thing in the world that the Navy needs is autonomous ships that are broken down in the middle of the Pacific and having to send salvage ships out there to go tow them back. And so we want to solve that.
I mean, you said it. It's like a pretty exquisite piece of hardware that you're looking to replace or to supplement. Yeah. Pretty big institutional customer in the form of the Navy. How are you guys getting in the game? Like, what does it take to get someone, Navy customers, and we know Navy's not a monolithic entity, but like customers within the Navy to say, okay, let's take a step together and see what you all can do. So maybe walk us through kind of where you're at in that journey and what some of those initial steps look like.
I think up front, the overall thing it takes is just a lot of persistence and hustle and curiosity to understand what problems do they really need solved in what order. And so I just spent a week in Hawaii at a conference with a bunch of end user customers. And the problems that SOFPAC and UserPAC and SurfPAC out there want solved are super different than the ones the guys in the program office, who are much more of the tech subject matter experts, want solved. And for us to build a ship platform, we've got to work with a program office that is responsible for the whole Navy and the whole force for maturing this technology and then ultimately fielding it. But we've also got to get buy-in from the end users. So I think it really takes that fine-tuned, really just problem scoping of, hey, what's the problem that they really do have there? And how do we fuse those together, and then kind of fuse those with money and mission for different organizations and let everything line up. And there's a lot of just ducks you have to get in a row to make that work.
Yeah. I mean, I want to even go a level deeper, because I think we're starting to see a playbook emerge right now. Obviously, maritime autonomy, very hot right now. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. Autonomy generally, like hot right now. I think anywhere you look, automation is key in the military in particular, air, sea, land, space, everywhere. Autonomy is the bell that is getting rung again and again and again, especially by new startups. But so we're starting to see a playbook, I think, which is these companies come out and there's, maybe a proof of concept, or you do a demonstration, you go to an event, and then you raise a bunch of money and then you announce a huge factory. And it's kind of what we've seen now. We don't have to name names, but we've seen it, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the last few months alone. And I'm curious if that, how you guys think about the playbook. Is that the model that you want to pursue, or is there a different way that you're going about it?
No, we definitely. So what's different about this company versus my last company was in warehouse automation with mobile robots, is the customer just assumed that you could make the mobile robot. Whereas I think for the Navy, they want to see sort of the capability and the ability to make it at scale. And they want that to come from kind of one company. And so as we think about designing and building autonomous ships, creating that factory of the future, or that shipyard of the future, is definitely part of that playbook. Because it's one thing if we can actually make an autonomous ship that can solve the requirements they're going after in terms of endurance and range and the different payloads that we carry. And then we also have to complement that with the ability to make them sort of at scale. And so that's different than kind of some of the other companies I've been part of in the past, but that's critical here.
And I would add too, like our third co-founder, Scott, who's our CTO, his mindset that he brings from his past experience is critical here. And so Scott was in the room when there were 5 engineers around a table and they were putting together this science project that became the Roomba, the autonomous vacuum cleaner. And they took that all the way up to TRL 9 and they got it fully ready. And then they're like, hey, well, someone's got to go build 1,000 of these and 100,000. Scott went to China and helped stand up the factory that built the next 4 million and led that team as VP of manufacturing. And so the mindset he's designing the ship with is that perspective of, hey, I'm designing something that right now is just individual parts and an architecture on paper, and is becoming very quickly something that we can scale and produce at scale. There aren't going to be 4 million unmanned ships, but they're going to be a lot more than 5 or 10.
Awesome comparison. You know, from Roombas to autonomous ships may have to be the title of the episode. I don't know. We'll come back and figure that out. That's pretty sweet. But yeah, the mindset of like how do you do from one to many, and then kind of get that process with the 5 nines or whatever it is in terms of the quality assurance is absolutely a different mindset. And I think we've seen this in other domains too with Replicator, right, in the last kind of year or two from DIU, where it's not just like, hey, can you prototype a drone that could succeed in this mission, but can you produce it at scale, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, but today. And so the kind of, the fight now mentality, or be ready to fight tonight mentality, I think is starting to kind of infuse more and more of these mission sets. And so, for you guys building to be able to support that on day one makes a lot of sense. Austin, I think you alluded to it just now in your answer of, you said, well, we're designing the ship. So where are you guys actually on the journey right now? I know you're publicly coming out of stealth, you're announcing the company, but kind of where is there a prototype? Is there a function? Where are we in terms of seeing product from Blue Water?
Yeah, so we want to get the hardware and the software right. And so we started the company last spring, and kind of within the first year, we've actually already put a test vessel in the water just outside of Boston, where we're testing the hardware and the software and how they all kind of integrate together. And then after we finish that testing, we'll start actually building our prototype ship. But it's super important to kind of like take it from kind of concept and paper to actually testing something on the water.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we saw, even in the last week or so, we saw, Regent and the Sea Gliders. We've seen, a few weeks ago, Boom and the supersonic aircraft now is tested. It just seems like, these companies take a long time, right? Some of these companies it's been 3, 5, 7+ years developing the technology. So what do you all think is like the timeline to go from where you are now to kind of prototype and to actually something that might be in test and evaluation? Yeah,
so we hope to have our first prototype vessel sort of in the water sort of sometime next year, probably not at the beginning of next year. But obviously the size of the vessel that we're building, it takes, even the lead time for some components is like many months. And so we're going to take all the lessons from this test vessel and apply it to the design of this prototype vessel. But we're building something that you just can't make in like 30 or 60 days or something like that. But we're moving as fast as we can.
And I think, there's a really interesting tension that you alluded to a minute ago when you're talking about fight tonight, because there are a lot of customers, some of them I was in Hawaii with last week, some of them are in the Pentagon, they ask us, can you build this right now? And how long would it take? And we're like, yes, we can build it right now. This is how long it would take. But you don't want us to build it right now because you want us to move at this plan where we can design it for a little bit, we can test, learn, build better, and just keep iterating and maturing the tech as we build and using the builds to learn instead of just building on spec with an existing design and going for speed, because that's not going to accelerate the learning speed. That's just going to get us metal in the water.
Yep.
So it's a really fine balance.
No, I think that's super important. And there's another point alongside it, which is, you've now alluded to a few times, Austin and Rylan, you as well, of being alongside customers. You guys go to trade shows, you go to, events. You're not just, siloed in the lab or in the factory kind of building. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about the kind of the customer engagement and business development side of the business now, as you're still designing the vessel and you're in the early stages. It's not operational. It's not something you want to build right now. And so I know we could talk about your design partner or partners, but also the fact that you're still doing kind of that prospecting, that customer development side of things. What does that look like? How do those conversations go when you're not showing up with a fully fledged, ready to roll product? Like, what are you hoping to get out of those, and what's the reception been?
No, I'll answer that with like a what and a how. And the what is we want a lot of feedback, right? Feedback from our customers is one of the most important things we can get. We try to get all different types of feedback. And the how, and I'll use an anecdote here. I ran into a former admiral who I used to work for in Navy intelligence. He was like, how's your career going? What's up, man? He like barely remember me because I was a baby '01 ensign when I worked for him. And I was like, it's great, sir. I'm building this autonomous ship. I have an amazing team. He's like, how are you doing that? You're the only engineer. I was like, I'm basically running a human intelligence game against the Navy so I can just learn from all these different people and access different parts of the organization, because we've got to learn from all these different parts, right? We've got to learn from the engineering experts in the program office. We've got to learn from the 5 unmanned ships the Navy and DARPA and SCO have already built and learned a ton of valuable lessons from. And we've got to go out to Hawaii and talk to the end users and see what tactical problems would they pay for and would they have solved tonight or tomorrow or the moment we can build a vessel that we trust.
Like if we work for the Navy, I'd say we are the Navy's product managers. We're trying to get feedback from everyone and then saying, based on all this feedback, here is what you actually need. Because if you just talk to one person, that's not the Navy. The Navy is tens of thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands all over. And so, our job has been to take all that feedback and saying, we have to think about balancing all this, but like, this is what you need.
Thank you for making that point explicit, because I think we've got a fairly, well-educated, seasoned audience here that's familiar with some of these things. And so even saying like our first customer is the Navy, I think, raises some antenna for folks, because they're like, well, that's not really a customer. That's a service, right? And the Navy, yes, the Department of Navy does buy some things, but chances are your customer's probably not the Department of Navy. How do you think about then from a design partner perspective? So you're going out there, you're having these conversations, you're getting feedback anywhere you can. Presumably there is a program office or there is a command that is maybe first among equals for you all in terms of who you're building with and for. How do you think about the corpus of feedback that you get from the broader Navy versus maybe the one or two that are really the near-term partners?
I think when you talk to like a program office, they are tasked with they already have the requirements that are out there. And so, and they have a lot of work and they have to go execute on those existing programs. What we're doing is we're trying to get ahead of the program office and saying, everyone we talk to say, yes, we need what you're building, but we're trying to get ahead of them because we're saying in 3 years, when the requirements are finally finalized, you might start working on this, but we're going to jump that because we already know what you need, or we're going to take a bet on what we think you need. And that's the beauty of startups is we're taking a bet and there's a chance this might not work, but there's a chance it actually might work. And so we're not going to wait until everything's super obvious, because then the program office would have those requirements, they send it out to industry, and you go through this long kind of cycle to actually go build something. So we're placing a bet.
I think that might be one of the best encapsulations of like what venture-backed startups really should be all about, which is that you are not at the earliest stages trying to just do all of the things that the military tells you they want, a little bit better, 2 times, 3 times better. It's like you've done it's a very well-informed bet. You guys have been doing research for a long time. You kind of have a perspective on where you think the industry is going. And if it goes in a totally different direction, the company either pivots or it doesn't succeed, right? And I think that's kind of being willing to say that and like, hey, look, this is a risk. This is a bet. It's not a sure thing. This is why we think it's it. And then investors can kind of opt in or out. Talent can opt in or out. And customers can opt in or out and say, like, that's either something we want to see in the world or we think you're wrong or we don't want to go that direction. I think it's one of the best encapsulations of what this whole game is. And so thanks for laying that out there clearly.
I think Austin would agree with this. Like, we're both risk-seeking people. Like, we seek risk. Like, I like the adrenaline of going into something where it's not obvious and you've got to make a bet, but then you're betting on your conviction and what you think the market needs. The same way that like Austin, is risky. He worked in a drone factory in Ukraine. Like, most people don't do that as an internship, but like, I think we're both like seek risk and seek adventure in our lives.
If you know more, then you can have an arbitrage in the information space.
I mean, tell us that story. Like, you spent a summer out in, or more than that, out in Ukraine in a drone factory. Like, one, what brought you there? And then 2, what'd you learn?
Yes. So what happened is I was doing a master's program where I had 2 summer internships. And my first summer I interned at McKinsey, like pretty much every other veteran goes to a big company, right? Great experience. I got to go help redo some insurance company in the Midwest. And then I signed the full-time offer, and the next summer I wanted to go intern for a small defense tech company where I could learn a ton in the defense tech space because I was getting super motivated. And I talked to two, at the time, very small companies who were now doing very well. I think we've already mentioned probably one of them on the call. And neither would take me because they were tiny and they don't want a business hire, right? They want some engineers and their founders are already covering the business space. And so I graduated MIT's business school with no summer internship for my next summer. And basically the week before graduation, I got on a Zoom call with two guys who were in Ukraine, who had started an NGO, who were MIT grads. And they were like, hey man, you can come out here for the summer. MIT will give you some sort of stipend and you can raise money and deliver aid to the front line with us for 10 or 15 hours a week. And the rest of the week, you can work in this drone factory that we support as one of our core partners for this NGO anyway. And I was like, sounds amazing. Love defense tech. No better place to do it. Like, will I get blown up? They said I wouldn't. And I was like, all right, that's good enough. And so I pretty much broke with my girlfriend, got a flight the next week and moved out and convinced another guy who was at the Harvard Kennedy School to go with me. And we spent the summer out there. And we just did two things. We talked to customers on the front line about what they needed and what needed to change. And we then talked back to suppliers, mainly in Western Europe, and helped bridge and build relationships between them and our factory so we could accelerate and actually prototype some stuff at speed because the factory wanted to move really fast. And big European OEMs do not want to move fast, especially during summer vacation.
Don't get between a European and their summer. That's awesome. One, Austin's ex-girlfriend, I'm sorry, mission first. You heard it here. You I mean, that experience is pretty unique, man. Like there aren't a lot of people talk about how much they, support this conflict or that conflict or aid here or aid there. Being out there kind of in the field and really close to that, I'm curious, Austin, you didn't have kind of a manufacturing background before. Rylan, I know you did, but presumably, I mean, you've used a lot of technology in the military and you've kind of seen it built. People talk all the time about like lessons from Ukraine. I think it's for the last 2 years, it's one of the most overused terms in defense without actually necessarily like putting a finer point on it. From the perspective that you had on the tech innovation side, the manufacturing side, are there, takeaways that you have from that experience that either you think the United States needs to be integrating or that you all at Blue Water Autonomy need to be integrating in how you do manufacturing? Because presumably you saw a lot, but what of that is relevant to us and to this situation?
Yeah, so on the production side, I'll just focus on one, and that's just speed of learning. And so I actually published a little bit about this morning in my Substack. When we would have something new ready, like a feature or whatever, a soldier who was home from the front line for the weekend visiting their family, which would be like in a unit of 50 soldiers, maybe a single digit number, like not 9, but like 3 to 5 would come home for the weekend to visit their families. They would stop by the parking lot on Sunday afternoon and see the demo of the new tech. And if it didn't work, they'd tell us, they give us feedback. And if it did work, they would take it back to Bakhmut, to the front line, and it'd be used in combat within the week. And so the tech that we were producing would go from TRL 7 to 9, or even 6 to 9 in like a couple days. And in our cycle here, that takes months, right? So speed there is incredible. And the reason I wrote about this morning, where I'm a little bit concerned in our space, is the U.S. Navy and the U.S. DoD are buying a lot of really cool, really impressive unmanned technology. A lot of it in the aerial space, like Switchblades and Altius and others, are being fielded in combat already and being tested. To my knowledge, and I paid pretty close attention, we have not used our unmanned maritime capability in combat yet, despite having a whole year of combat operations in the Red Sea recently. And so we're buying enough that we should be able to test some of them, right? The GARCs, they're producing 32 per month for their open source information, and a couple other companies are producing a lot. So we should be able to test some of these out, given this scenario over in the Middle East. And I think we can learn from the Ukrainians and just test what we have. If we only had 1 or 2, we can't really go test them in combat, but we have a bunch now. So we should be testing and learning as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I guess, why do you guys think we aren't? Everybody has probably opinions on that, but what's the barrier to us doing more of that testing?
I think it's cultural.
So when I was in the Navy 20 years ago, like we were untouchable. Like, I was in the Persian Gulf, went to the Suez Canal, Panama Canal, all around the world, but we were untouchable. And the Navy is actually really good at building these exquisite systems and these exquisite platforms that last for 40 to 50 years are untouchable. And we still build the best destroyers, the best submarines, the best carriers in the world. But we need to complement that with autonomous systems that aren't survivable, but they're more either expendable or attritable. And we need to start experimenting with those a lot faster.
Maybe it goes a little bit to the number of nines in your certainty about your product working that I think you alluded to earlier, Noah. And if you're building a rocket, right, or you're building a nuclear weapon or something that blows up or flies, it's got to have a lot of nines in its certainty of working, right? But for something like a surface vessel, it doesn't need as many nines, right? And so we haven't even defined, I think, yet the total probability of how certain we must be that our stuff works. But in most of the scenarios we're dealing with right now, the worst case is you lose power and then it kind of still floats and you have some time to recover, right? And it's not going to blow apart over the Caribbean like a rocket did last week. And so I think the Navy's got to, I think, shift a little bit towards that culture for some of their tech where stuff isn't going to blow up necessarily.
I think all astute observations, and I want to bring this back to the company for a second, because you guys, I mean, we already alluded to, you're not just building product, you're out talking to customers. Austin, I mean, for those of you who don't subscribe, Austin's got a phenomenal Substack. It's not just, kind of thoughts and feelings. There's original research and you've gotten access to kind of bespoke data sets and things around OTAs and have put out, I think, really top tier analysis on the environment and the ecosystem. Folks should take a look. We'll link to it in the show notes. But the broader question for you guys, or for both of you, is you clearly understand that there are, and I think maybe as the industry's matured in the last few years, even since like venture kind of really came back into defense tech in 2018, 2017 and 19, there's kind of this recognition that companies can't just build and sell product, even at the earliest stages. Like even though those are the core functions of any startup, in the defense world, in this government relations world, there's these other functions. There's like other things that companies need to do to kind of like shape the battlefield to be able to win. And I'm curious what else you guys, so product, obviously huge, customer engagement, huge. Clearly, Austin, you're kind of staking a claim to some research and thought leadership things to inform folks as well. But you all have, nuanced views, not just about the world as it is, but as you're trying to shape it to become. What are some of the other things that you all are taking on, even at the earliest stages of a company, to make it possible for Blue Water to succeed?
So obviously we're building hardware. And I think with hardware startups, you got one shot, right? So you get to raise that sort of seed round. You go through this honeymoon phase where you have money in the bank and everything's great, but then you have actually got to go build something. And you've got to think about what milestones are you going to hit. So the thing you built, the customer says, I want a lot of that and I want more of that. And that's the valley that we're going through right now is you build it, you make a bet, and then the customer gives strong signals so you can continue to raise more money. But if you build the wrong thing, or if you're off in terms of the amount of capital you need, or if you hire the wrong people, there's so many ways that you can kind of fail going through this valley that we're going through right now.
I don't know. This will be a fun experiment. Like if you lay this out, and I know you probably don't want to be on the record on this, but if you were to lay out like what is the path that Blue Water takes in the next 3 years? We're March 2025. In March 2028, like what are the kind of key milestones or steps that you see the company achieving to be where you want to be in 3 years?
So if I think about our customer, what our customer needs to see in the next 2 years is a truly autonomous ship that can go long distances and be reliable and not have a chase boat. That's the nut that needs to be cracked right now. There are some autonomous ships that are out there, but they still have the chase boats. They still have people going on them every couple of days to turn a wrench, to reset a breaker, to do something. Or people don't trust the autonomy and, they want to watch it if it's near other ships or something. So like that's the nut that needs to get cracked. Once that nut is cracked and people actually believe they can actually build an autonomous ship, then you've got to show that you can build them at scale. And that's kind of between now and 2028. Those are the two things that we need to solve at a very high level. When I was in the Navy as an engineering officer, we were constantly like maintaining and like doing all different types of activities on the ship, whether it's in the engine room, in combat, or on the bridge. And so if you told me 20 years ago that you would take everyone off a ship and be able to do some of the same missions, I'd be like, you are crazy. But having worked at other companies like Amazon, like if you walk into an Amazon warehouse, it's highly automated today. And it's all the hardware and software that they've been put together. So like, I know those nuts can be cracked, but I think it's a skeptical customer that we need to kind of bring along this journey.
And I think the last part there is you can't just over-engineer your reliability like maybe you would for a mission critical space flight or something to keep humans alive, because then you're not going to have something you can produce many of if you add 5 or 8 redundancies for every single part of the ship. So there's a lot of tension between the producibility and the reliability.
I mean, you've said scale. I mean, you guys have said scale a number of times since the beginning. What scale is achievable in 3 years?
So the great thing about the size of vessel that we're going after is we're not competing with the same dry docks or cranes that are making today's carriers, submarines, or destroyers. And so there are plenty of shipyards all throughout the US that can make this type of vessel and highly capable. And so that's kind of one of the unlocks in terms of thinking about scale, because the Navy has a shipbuilding problem today. The current administration has been very vocal about it too, but you're not going to all of a sudden make another Bath Iron Works, another Newport News, like in the next 3 years. Those are massive facilities that take 5 or 10 years to go build out. But I think, when you think about the size of vessel that we're going after, like we have plenty of capacity to go build these types of ships right now.
Yeah, I think the scale that's achievable is the scale that the customer can buy into. Yeah. Like the customers, all the OODA loops are out there. That's the slow part. And that's because they need to build trust, and it's a big institution.
What I'm hearing is like, hey, we'll respond. We can scale to the demand signal. Production capability, or excuse me, production capacity. You don't think it doesn't seem like a constraint right now? Not like some of the other shipyards for other size vessels. You maybe don't even need to build your own, is what I'm hearing, to be able to produce these things. Is that accurate?
I don't think you need to, but I think there's plenty of opportunity to rethink how you actually design and build an autonomous ship. And so, I think we think about it as like a computer on a keel in terms of what we're building. And that means that we're rethinking everything about how you build a manned ship today, which means that we can think about designing it for manufacturing. So you can actually take automation and other technologies to actually go build these a lot faster for a lower price. And so we're rethinking everything across from the design to the manufacturing.
Just for the sake of our listeners who may or may not be familiar with this particular segment, when you say scale, though, are we talking about dozens? Are we talking about hundreds? Are we talking about thousands for this particular capability? What do you think ultimately the Navy and the broader ecosystem needs?
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is that we complement today's manned fleet. So we're not trying to replace destroyers or anything. But when you complement today's manned fleet, is that you can have multiple autonomous ships per existing manned ships that are out there. So in a Navy of 400 ships, and you multiply it by 4, all of a sudden you're at thousands of sort of autonomous ships complementing today's fleet. So it's not dozens, it's more than 100, but it's not like tens of thousands, and that's kind of like the range that we play with.
And I would add, for your listeners, I listened to the Apex episode with Ian a couple days ago. It was just great. And I think what we're trying to help do is do what companies like really like SpaceX and Starlink started, and companies like Ian's are continuing, is disaggregate the architecture. So 20 years ago, we only had a couple hundred really big, really expensive satellites in space, we being humans. And now we have tens of thousands, I've lost track, right, of much smaller, cheaper satellites in space. If we can achieve the vision of distributed maritime operations on the Navy ConOps side, and then of unmanned, reliable, producible maritime systems, on the supply side, then you can have many small disaggregated maritime vessels, the same way you have many small disaggregated satellites, computers, pretty much everything else that we produce, the small, the agile, and the many. There's a lot more.
It's a really good segue to kind of where I wanted to go as we move towards, I don't know, some big picture thoughts and some forward-looking thoughts as we kind of reach the third portion of this, which is, we alluded to, this is a really hot segment right now. Like a lot of naval autonomy, a lot of maritime autonomy companies, whether it's the big rays and the big guns at Saronic, or if it's the Vatten systems up closer to you guys in New England, and there's everybody in between. There truly feels like north of a dozen companies probably at this point, kind of stepping into the fray and saying, hey, there's some need here, undersea, surface, what have you. I'm curious for your reflection on this, because the space has changed a lot since you guys first started talking, over a year ago. And what does that mean? Obviously, like the need is real, but how do you think about, is this a rising tide lifts all boats, proverbially here? Is this a competitive or a collaborative dynamic right now as you guys have stepped into the fray?
I think it's definitely collaborative. Like when you think about autonomy and you think about sort of our customer, the Navy, you think about autonomy under the water, you think about it on the surface, and you think about it in the air, and then you think about it in different sizes. And so they all kind of make sense. I think what the question will be is how many of each type does the Navy want, and how do they put it into a broader sort of system of systems, and how do they all work together? But I think for all these companies, we're building stuff that the Navy will use eventually. It's just one of the risks is just timing. It's just like this Navy, is the Navy going to start adopting autonomous ships in the next 5 years, or is it the next 15 years? But nothing that we're doing is crazy. It's just, I think, one, we're seeing a willingness by the customer to start to work with startups and who are moving fast. And two, we're starting to, the customer's starting to have opinions about how these systems work together. Timing
is maybe the single most important factor in starting a company, right? That we try to talk less about because it's not totally within control some of the time, but it's a really fair point. The other side of that coin then is for you guys, like what, not success we understand the mission success portion of this, but from a company's success standpoint, I mean, you guys you're made a decision. You're putting your lives into this. You're putting time, money, certainly blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm curious how you think about success. Austin, you had a great post a few weeks ago on the M&A activity or the lack thereof in defense and how that's, an important kind of ingredient in a well-functioning industry. And as you think about, Rylan, to your point, okay, so there's different sizes, there's different form factors, there's different domains of surface and undersea and what have you. Do these all remain independent companies? Do we see consolidation? Are there, is there public, IPO potential here for the category? And then for you all as a new company, I'm sorry, I'm asking about 17 questions here, but for you all as a new company, like what is your aspiration for the company itself?
So you can ask me in 4 years, maybe I'll have a different opinion about that. But I think we think less about sort of the exit and what this company looks like in 10 years and more about how can we kind of build the best autonomous ships that are out there and help the Navy accelerate the adoption of these types of platforms. To me, that's success. And then if we can do that, then other things will come. And who knows if there'll be consolidation or kind of where this will be in 4 or 5 years. It's really hard to kind of see where the industry would be at that point, but it's just more about the product, making sure that the Navy can actually use it in everyday operations.
Being focused on the mission, focused on the customer is probably a good place to start. This is great. We've covered a lot of ground. You allowed me to ask a lot of questions that I know are probably either not answerable or ones that you'd rather not talk about publicly yet. But thanks for sharing with us. It's really exciting to see you here at the start of the journey. If folks, as you're coming out of stealth here, if folks want to follow along, if folks want to consider joining the team and joining the mission, how can they best learn more?
So we have a LinkedIn, Blue Water Autonomy. We have a website, blw.ai. We'll have some job postings on that website soon. And by the time that this recording goes live, we will have an X account too. It's Blue Water Ships.
Fantastic. And we'll link all of those here in the YouTube, the Substack, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Gentlemen, congratulations on the launch. Thank you for making time to join us here today. Best of luck to you. And we look forward to coming and checking back in with you a little bit down the line and seeing how the plan plays out and all the success that I'm sure you're going to have. So thank you and best of luck.
Noah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Noah.